They made fun of me at Millionaire's party until he asked me to play the piano. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's return to our main character. The night began under a chandelier that looked like it could pay her rent for 3 years. The air inside the Hale mansion glittered with crystal glasses, perfume worth more than her monthly income, and the quiet, cutting laughter of people who had never worried about a bill in their lives. She stood near the grand piano, her assigned spot, hugging her sheet music like a shield. Her dress, a hand-me-down she'd altered herself, clung a little too tightly at the waist, and she silently prayed no one would notice the faint thread she'd stitched in the back seat of an Uber 30 minutes earlier. But of course, someone did. A blonde girl in a designer gown drifted past her, eyes narrowing as if inspecting something unpleasant on the floor. "Cute dress," she said, sugar-sweet and deadly. "Vintage from where?" "A thrift store in 1998. The group around her snickered. Another girl leaned in, pretending to whisper but loud enough for the whole room. "I didn't know they were letting staff bring their own outfits now." She felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her gaze on the keys. She wasn't staff, she was a hired pianist for the night. A gig she needed. A gig she'd taken even though her mom's medical bills sat like unpaid ghosts on the kitchen counter at home. She swallowed the ache in her throat and told herself to breathe. Just breathe. Play well. Survive the night. But then one of the girls reached out and flicked the corner of her sheet music, knocking it to the polished floor. Pages scattered like fallen feathers. Oops. Laughter again, sharp, bright, ugly. She knelt quickly, gathering the pages before they were stepped on. That was when a pair of polished dress shoes stopped in front of her. She froze. She hadn't noticed anyone approaching. A calm voice, low and steady, cut through the room. "Is this how you treat musicians here?" The laughter died instantly. She lifted her head. He stood there, dark hair, crisp suit, no arrogance in his eyes. He didn't look amused. If anything, he looked disappointed in everyone else. Without breaking eye contact with the girls, he leaned down and handed her the last sheet of music. His hand was warm. "Steady. Take your time," he murmured to her. "Play when you're ready." The room went silent, the kind of silence that comes when power shifts, subtle, undeniable, irreversible. She didn't know who he was. She only knew one thing: for the first time that night, someone had chosen to stand beside her. And that changed everything. For a moment after he handed her the last sheet of music, the entire room felt frozen, like the chandeliers themselves were holding their breath. She stood slowly, gripping the pages as if they were the only solid thing she had left to hold onto. When she finally met his eyes, she felt something unexpected. Not pity. Not condescension. Just a calm, steady warmth that made her chest tighten. Before she could say anything, the blonde girl in the designer gown flipped her hair with forced confidence. "Adrian, we were just joking," she said quickly. "She is just the pianist for tonight." "Adrian." She repeated the name in her head without reacting, trying to place it. Had she heard it somewhere before? But the man did not look at the blonde girl. He kept his attention on the pianist, his voice quiet but firm. "You deserve respect here," he said. Then, as if the rest of the room no longer mattered, he stepped aside, giving her space to return to the piano. But her hands were trembling so badly that she wondered if she could even play. She sat down, steadying her breath, trying to pretend the whole room was empty. Her fingers touched the keys, but before she began, Adrian spoke again. "Let her play," he said, this time with a quiet authority that rippled through the entire crowd like a command from someone who did not need to raise his voice to be obeyed. She played. At first, the notes wavered, thin like a whisper unsure of itself. Then the music found its path, weaving into the air, filling the hall with Something soft, something brave, something that belonged to her alone. When the last note faded, the room was silent. Not mocking silent, but stunned silent. A few guests exchanged glances, as if surprised that the girl they had just insulted had talent they could not deny. She stood quickly, grabbed her bag, and slipped out a side door before anyone could say anything. She needed air. She needed space. She needed to stop shaking. Outside, the cold night wrapped around her like a breath she had forgotten to take. She sank onto the stone steps, the sound of the party muffled behind the heavy doors. For a second, she let herself feel the humiliation again, the laughter, the sting in her chest, the way her fingers had curled so tight around her sheet music that the edges were still bent. She pressed the heel of her hand to her forehead. Why did she let people like that get to her? Why could she not be stronger, more confident, more untouchable? Are you all right? She froze. The voice came from behind her, calm, familiar. Adrian. He stepped out into the cold, letting the heavy door fall shut behind him. There was no spotlight now, no grand room, no audience. Just the two of them in the quiet night. She stood immediately, brushing off her dress. I am fine, she said quickly, though her voice betrayed her. Sorry, I did not mean to cause a scene in there. He shook his head. You did nothing wrong. She hugged her sheet music to her chest like armor. I do not belong in places like that. Adrian looked at her for a long moment, the kind of look that seemed to see more than she wanted him to. Those people laugh because it is easy, he said. Existing with real talent and real heart is harder. You did the hard thing tonight. She almost laughed at the absurdity of it. You do not even know me. Adrian's expression softened. Maybe not yet. But I know what it looks like when someone fights to stay standing. She swallowed, unsure what to say. Then, gently, he held out a small piece of paper. It was the page of her original composition, the one that had slipped from her bag earlier. The edges were slightly crumpled, but he had smoothed it out carefully. This is yours, he said. You should not let anyone make you feel small for what you create. Her breath caught. For a moment she could not speak. She took the page from him, her fingers brushing his. Something warm pulsed through her chest. She wanted to thank him, truly thank him, but the words got stuck in her throat. Adrian glanced toward the long driveway illuminated by soft garden lights. Can I give you a ride home? He asked gently. She hesitated. She should say no. She barely knew him. And yet, after everything that had happened inside, the idea of walking alone into the night felt heavier than usual. She finally nodded. All right. Thank you. Adrian offered a small smile and gestured toward the sleek black car waiting near the curb. She followed slowly, unaware that this quiet walk across the mansion's front steps was the start of something that would change her life entirely. The ride home was quiet at first, not uncomfortable, but the kind of quiet where two people who barely know each other are trying to make sense of the strange gravity pulling them closer. The interior of the car was warm, wrapped in soft leather and the faint scent of cedar, a sharp contrast to the cold night air outside. She sat with her sheet music on her lap, fingers tracing the creases on the page he had returned to her. Adrian kept his eyes on the road, hands steady on the wheel, guiding the car through the winding driveway that curved away from the mansion's glowing lights. When they reached the main road, he spoke softly, almost like he was easing into her world instead of imposing his own. Do you always play with that much emotion? She blinked, surprised. I did not think anyone noticed. Everyone noticed, he said. They just pretended not to. She looked out the window, the passing streetlights flickering across her reflection. It did not feel like it, she murmured. When people laugh at you, it is hard to hear anything else. Adrian glanced at her briefly. You are allowed to be hurt. But their laughter says more about them than it does about you. She swallowed, unsure how someone she met less than an hour ago could read her so clearly. The car slowed as they reached her neighborhood. The sharp contrast from the mansion was immediate, the street lamps buzzed. Faintly, some flickering, and the sidewalk had a thin crack running down the middle like a fault line she had memorized. It was the part of the city where people carried their dreams in small containers, hoping they would not spill before morning. She gave quiet directions, and when they reached the old brick apartment building she lived in, she felt a strange embarrassment bloom in her chest. The building was worn, with peeling paint and a broken fire escape that the landlord always said he would fix but never did. She wished, for a fleeting moment, that he had dropped her off at the bus stop instead. She did not want him to see this part of her life. But Adrian did not react at all. If he was surprised, he hid it well. He parked the car and turned off the engine, but he did not rush to open the door. Instead, he looked at her with a calm sincerity that made her breath slow down. "Thank you for letting me drive you home," he said. "I know you did not have to." She shook her head. "I should say thank you. For everything tonight." He held her gaze for a moment. "I meant what I said earlier. You deserve respect. And your music deserves to be heard." Her chest tightened again, and she looked away before he could see the warmth rising in her expression. "Good night, Adrian." She reached for the door handle, but his voice stopped her. "One more thing," he said. She turned back slowly. Adrian reached into the center console and held out a small business card. It was simple, minimalistic, with his name embossed in silver. "If you ever need someone to listen to your music," he said, "call me. Or if you need help." She stared at the card, her breath caught somewhere between surprise and disbelief. "Help? Why me?" Adrian hesitated for a fraction of a second, the first moment he looked almost vulnerable. "Because sometimes people spend their whole lives being surrounded by noise," he said quietly, "and they forget what real sound feels like. Your music reminded me." She felt the weight of his words sink into her, deeper than she expected. She took the card gently, her fingertips brushing his. "Good night," she whispered, softer this time. Adrian watched her walk toward the building's entrance, her silhouette framed by the flickering hallway light. She paused at the door, glancing back. He gave a small nod, not a wave, just a quiet acknowledgement that he was still there. When she stepped inside and the door clicked shut behind her, Adrian remained parked for a moment, staring at the empty sidewalk. Inside her apartment, she leaned against the door, pressing the card to her chest. She did not know why she felt like the night had shifted something fundamental in her life, something she could not name yet. She walked to her small kitchen table, placed the sheet music and card down, and stared at them as if they were puzzle pieces from a future she did not yet recognize. In that moment, she had no idea that meeting him was not luck. It was the beginning of a chain of events that would rewrite everything she thought she knew about herself, her talent, and her worth. The next morning arrived with the faint smell of coffee drifting through her apartment and the harsh reality of a new day settling in. The sun barely reached through the thin curtains, casting pale stripes across the floor. She sat at the small kitchen table, staring at the silver-embossed business card Adrian had given her, running her thumb over the letters again and again as if they might reveal some hidden message. She knew better than to read too much into one night. Wealthy people lived in a world of sudden gestures and fleeting kindness, while she lived in a world where rent was due every month and the grocery store discounts determined what went on the table. Still, something about his words echoed in her mind. "You should not let anyone make you feel small for what you create." She folded the card gently and slipped it into her bag before heading out. She had a shift at the local cafe, a part-time job that barely covered utilities but gave her enough flexibility to still take music gigs when they came. The cafe smelled like roasted beans and warm pastries, a comfort she had come to rely on. She tied her apron and began her routine, greeting customers, steaming milk, wiping down counters. Everything felt normal, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the night before. Around noon, the bell above the cafe door chimed. She glanced up, ready to welcome another customer, but her words caught in her throat. Adrian walked in. He was dressed more casually this time, a simple button-down shirt and dark jeans, but he still carried that quiet confidence that made him impossible to miss. For a second, she wondered if she was imagining him, but then he gave her a gentle nod. "Good afternoon," he said. "I hope I am not interrupting your day." She tried to compose herself. "No, not at all." "What brings you here?" "Coffee," he replied with a slight smile. "And maybe, to check if you are doing all right." Her breath hitched, but she tried not to show it. She took his order with hands that tried very hard not to shake and prepared the drink carefully, adding the perfect amount of foam, hoping it made her look more put together than she felt. When she handed it to him, Adrian stayed near the counter instead of leaving. "I was hoping to ask you something," he said. "Would you meet me for a short walk after your shift?" Her heart skipped. "Why?" "Because I believe you have more music inside you than you allow yourself to share," he said. "And I would like to hear it." She hesitated. In her world, moments like these usually came with strings attached, expectations she could not meet. But there was no pressure in his voice, only sincerity. She finally nodded. "My shift ends in 30 minutes. "I will wait," he said, taking a seat at a corner table. He did not pull out a laptop or a phone like most people. Instead, he simply sat there, sipping his coffee and occasionally glancing out the window, as if he had nowhere else to be. When her shift ended, she untied her apron and walked over to him with cautious steps. They left the cafe together and walked down the quiet street lined with small shops and old brick buildings. The sun was lower now, casting a warm golden hue over everything. "You know," Adrian said, "I looked up your name last night. I found a recording of you from 5 years ago. A small student showcase." She nearly stumbled. "You did what?" "I was curious," he said gently. "You played beautifully back then." "You still do." She let out a slow breath. "That was before life got complicated." He nodded. "Life always gets complicated. But talent does not go away because of it." They stopped at a small park bench, shaded by an old oak tree. Adrian sat, and she sat beside him, feeling strangely comfortable. He reached into his coat and pulled out the page of her composition again. "I read this," he said. "I did not understand all the musical symbols, but I think I understood the feeling." She looked at him, confused. "What feeling?" He met her gaze. "Loneliness," he said softly. "And hope." Both at the same time. Her breath trembled. No one had ever said something like that to her before. No one had ever heard her music that deeply. Before she could respond, Adrian continued, "I want to show you something tomorrow. Somewhere I think you might like. If you are willing to come." She hesitated, the fear of crossing into a world she did not belong to flickering in her chest. "What kind of place?" He smiled gently. "A music hall. One that has been waiting a long time for someone like you." She stared at him, heart pounding, not knowing that this invitation would become the turning point of everything she believed about herself. The next afternoon arrived with a feeling she could not quite name, a mixture of nervousness and anticipation that made her check the time every few minutes while she finished her shift at the cafe. When the clock finally struck 4, she stepped outside and saw Adrian waiting at the corner, leaning casually against a street lamp as if he had been part of the scenery all along. He smiled when he saw her, a warm, reassuring smile that steadied the unease swirling in her stomach. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, though her voice felt stuck somewhere in her throat. They walked together toward a part of the city she rarely visited, a district filled with older buildings restored into galleries, theaters, and studios. The sidewalks were wider here, lined with trees wrapped in strings of white lights. Everything looked like a postcard from a life she did not belong to, yet something about walking beside him made the world feel less intimidating. After a few minutes, they stopped in front of a large brick building with arched windows and a tall wooden door that looked like it belonged on the cover of a music history book. A small sign beside it read, "Crescent Hall." She looked at Adrian, unsure. "This place looks expensive." "It is," he said lightly, "but do not worry. You are not here as a guest. You are here as a musician." Her pulse quickened. He pushed open the door, and they stepped into a grand, dim hallway that smelled faintly of polished wood and old sheet music. Their footsteps echoed softly as they walked. At the end of the corridor, Adrian opened another door, revealing a medium-sized concert hall, warm and intimate, illuminated by soft golden lights. On the stage stood a gleaming grand piano, its surface reflecting the empty rows of velvet seats. She froze. "Why did you bring me here?" He turned to her gently. "Because I believe this is where your music belongs. And because it is time someone listened to you the right way." She swallowed hard. "Adrian, I cannot play here. This is too much." "It is not too much," he said. "It is just new. There is a difference." She stared at the piano, her heart racing. "What if I mess up?" "Then you mess up," he said simply. "And we try again." There was no pressure in his voice, no expectation, only quiet belief. She stepped slowly onto the stage, her fingers trailing along the edge of the piano. The air felt different up here, heavier but also full of possibilities she had long since stopped allowing herself to imagine. She sat down on the bench, her hands resting lightly on her lap. Adrian sat in the front row, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, giving her his full attention. She let out a slow breath and opened the lid of the piano. The familiar scent of polished wood and warm metal wrapped around her like an old friend. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play the first chords of her original composition. The sound echoed through the hall, fuller and more powerful than she had ever heard it before. Her nerves melted away as the music took over, flowing from her hands like it had been waiting for this moment. When she reached the final note, she let it linger in the air until silence reclaimed the room. Adrian stood slowly, clapping softly, not with excitement but with deep appreciation. "That," he said, "was beautiful." She felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It felt different," she admitted. "It felt real." Adrian approached the stage. "That is because you were finally heard." She met his gaze, and for a moment, the world stopped moving. She did not know what this meant or where it was leading, but she knew one thing: this moment mattered. More than any gig she had played. More than any compliment she had ever received. Adrian stepped closer. "I brought you here for a reason," he said quietly. "There is something I want to tell you. Something you deserve to know." Her breath caught, unaware that what he was about to reveal would change everything she thought she understood about him, and about the night they met. For a long moment after Adrian said he had something she deserved to know, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. The golden lights above them flickered softly, casting warm reflections across the polished surface of the grand piano. She sat perfectly still on the bench, her fingers curled slightly as if the last note she played was still vibrating somewhere inside her chest. Adrian stepped closer, the quiet echo of his shoes filling the room. "The night of the party," he began slowly, "I was not there as a guest. I was there because the event was hosted by my company." She blinked, unsure if she heard correctly. "Your company?" He nodded, his expression calm but sincere. "Hale Industries. And the Hale Foundation. Both are mine." Her breath caught. Suddenly the fragments of the night clicked together in her mind. The quiet authority he carried. The way everyone else in the room shifted when he spoke. The way the blonde girls panicked when he confronted them. She stared at him, stunned. "So you are the Adrian Hale? The one whose name is on half the buildings in this city?" He looked almost embarrassed by the label. "Yes. But that was not why I approached you. That was not why I stood up for you. I did that because what they did was wrong. You did not deserve any of it." She felt her heartbeat thudding in her ears, too loud, too fast. "Then why did you not tell me who you were?" Adrian took a breath, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet vulnerability she had not seen before. "Because people treat me differently when they know. They either want something from me or they are afraid to be themselves. But you were just you. Honest. Real. Talented. I did not want to change that by revealing my name too soon." She shook her head, overwhelmed. But you let me walk out of that party thinking you were just another guest. You let me sit in your car, you let me talk to you like you were, like a person, he finished softly. Her lips parted, but she could not form the words. Adrian stepped even closer. I never wanted to deceive you. I just wanted to know you without the walls that usually come up the moment people hear my last name. She looked down at her hands, trying to steady herself. I do not know what to think, she whispered. You should have told me. You are right, he said. I should have. And I am sorry. His voice carried no excuses, only honesty. That sincerity, more than anything else, made the tension in her chest loosen just a little. But the confusion lingered. She stood from the piano bench, taking a step back as if she needed air. Adrian, your world is not mine. I am barely making rent, and you own places like this music hall. I do not understand why you are doing all of this. I am doing it, he said gently, because your music deserves to be heard. Because someone should have believed in you a long time ago. And because the night I met you, you reminded me what passion looks like. She swallowed hard, emotion rising painfully in her throat. This is too much, she said quietly. It feels like it is happening too fast. Adrian nodded slowly. I am not asking for anything from you. Not a decision, not a commitment, not anything you are not ready to give. All I am asking is that you let yourself step into the places you belong, even if you do not believe you belong there yet. She looked at him again, truly looked at him, and saw not the billionaire, not the powerful figure from the party, but the man who had knelt to pick up her sheet music, who had protected her dignity, who had brought her into this hall so she could hear her own music the way it was meant to sound. The silence between them grew thick with unspoken words. Finally she took a slow breath. I need time, she said softly. I need to understand what all of this means. Take all the time you need, he replied. I am not going anywhere. His voice was gentle, steady, and for the first time she noticed something unexpected in his expression, a hint of fear, as if he was afraid she would walk away and disappear from his life as suddenly as she had entered it. She stepped off the stage, her footsteps soft on the wooden floor, her mind swirling with uncertainty and questions she had no answers for. But one thing was certain, nothing about her life would ever be the same after this moment, and she was no longer sure if that terrified her or thrilled her. The days that followed were heavier than she expected. Every time she tried to focus on her normal routine, her thoughts kept drifting back to that moment in Crescent Hall when Adrian revealed the truth. It felt like her world had been split in two, the before and the after, and she was still standing somewhere in the middle, unsure which direction to take. At the cafe, she moved slower, distracted by the weight of it all. Even her music felt different when she practiced in her small apartment. Each chord seemed to carry the echo of that grand hall, reminding her of a version of herself she was not sure she was brave enough to become. One evening, as she wiped down tables near closing time, the bell above the door chimed. She looked up instinctively, expecting a regular customer, but froze when she saw the same blonde girl from the party walk inside. Her stomach tightened. The girl wore a designer coat and sunglasses even though it was nighttime, and her smirk immediately set the air on edge. So it is true, the girl said, stepping forward. Adrian Hale really has been spending time with you. Her heart dropped. Why are you here? Relax, the girl said, waving a hand dismissively. I just came to warn you. He has a history of helping people like you. Charity cases. He lifts them up for a while, makes them feel special, and then he moves on. It is flattering, really. You are the newest project. The words hit her like a slap. You do not know me, she said quietly. The girl chuckled. I know someone who does not belong in his world when I see one. And trust me, he will realize it too. A heat rose in her chest, a mix of embarrassment and anger, but before she could respond, the cafe manager appeared and asked the blonde girl to leave if she was not ordering anything. With a final smirk, the girl walked out, leaving the air cold behind her. She finished her shift with shaking hands, replaying the cruel words over and over. When she stepped outside, the street was dim and quiet, but she startled when she saw Adrian standing by his car. "I did not want to intrude," he said softly, noticing her wide eyes. "I just wanted to make sure you got home safely." She looked away, her voice tight. "How long have you been waiting?" "About 10 minutes. She clutched her bag. "You should not do that. People will talk." "Let them talk," he said. "The only thing that matters is how you feel." But that was exactly the problem. She did not know how she felt. "One of your friends came in today," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "She told me I was just a project to you. Another charity case you lifted for fun." Adrian's expression hardened. "She is not my friend." And she had no right to say that. "But is she wrong?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Because from where I stand, our worlds are nothing alike. You appear in a fancy mansion one night and change the course of my whole week. But you get to walk away unaffected. I do not." Adrian stepped closer, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "If I have made you feel like an obligation, then I have failed you. That was never my intention." "Then what was your intention?" she whispered. He hesitated, not because he did not know the answer, but because he was choosing his words carefully. "I wanted to help you because your music deserves to be heard. And yes, because I care about you more than I expected to." The admission made her heart twist painfully. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that this was real. But the blonde girl's words sliced through her doubt. "I need space," she said finally. "My life is complicated enough. I cannot afford to be someone's temporary charity or someone's experiment." Adrian's face shifted with hurt, but he nodded slowly. "If space is what you need, I will respect that. But I hope you will let me prove that what I feel is real." She stepped back, putting distance between them. "Good night, Adrian." He stood there, silent, watching her walk away into the dim glow of the streetlights. And even though she did not turn around, she felt the weight of his gaze until she disappeared around the corner, her heart torn between fear and the growing truth she refused to name. The next few days unfolded in a blur of silence and second-guessing. She went to work, practiced her music, and tried to convince herself that putting distance between them was the right thing. But every night, when the city quieted and the apartment lights dimmed, the memory of Adrian standing under the street lamp with that hurt in his eyes kept replaying in her mind. She hated how much space he occupied in her thoughts. She hated even more how much she missed the way he believed in her. Still, fear was a stubborn weight, and she carried it everywhere. On the fourth evening, she returned home exhausted, expecting nothing but another night of reheated leftovers and restless thinking. But when she climbed the stairs and reached her apartment door, she froze. A small envelope lay on the floor, slid through the bottom gap. Her name was written on the front in neat handwriting she recognized immediately. She picked it up slowly, her pulse quickening as she opened it. Inside was a single ticket. A ticket to Crescent Hall. The same hall where she had played her composition. But this one had her name printed on it under the words "Private Rehearsal, Guest of Honor." Her breath caught. For a moment she stood perfectly still, trying to make sense of it. There was no note, no explanation, nothing but the ticket itself. She closed her door behind her and leaned against it, her fingers trembling around the small piece of cardstock. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to pretend it meant nothing. But another part of her, the part she tried so hard to silence, felt a quiet pull, the unmistakable tug of someone trying to show her something she did not yet understand. The next evening, she found herself walking toward Crescent Hall despite every anxious voice in her head. The sky was fading into deep blue, and the city lights shimmered on the pavement like scattered stars. When she reached the building, the door was already unlocked. She stepped inside, her heartbeat echoing louder than her footsteps. The corridor was dim, just like the first time, but this time she could hear faint music drifting from the concert hall. Soft piano notes, warm and slow. She followed the sound, her breath catching as she pushed open the door. The hall was empty except for the stage lights glowing gently. And on the stage was the same grand piano, but something was different. A framed display stood beside it. Her heart stopped when she saw what was inside the frame. Her sheet music. The same page Adrian had picked up the night of the party. The same page she had written by hand years ago. Now it was mounted carefully, behind glass, with a small engraved plaque beneath it that read, "Every great musician begins with a single note. Hers deserves to be heard." She covered her mouth with her hand, emotion rising so suddenly it nearly knocked the air out of her lungs. Adrian stepped out from the side of the stage, his expression gentle, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. "I wanted you to see what I see," he said. "Talent that deserves a place in the world. A voice that deserves space. A future that deserves to start now." She struggled to speak. "Adrian, why would you do this?" "Because you needed a reminder," he said. "Not from the world, not from your fears, but from someone who believes in who you are." She shook her head slowly, tears gathering in her eyes. "You did all of this after I pushed you away." He nodded. "Caring about someone does not disappear because they are scared. And I know why you stepped back. The gap between our worlds feels enormous. But music does not belong to any world. It belongs to whoever has the courage to create it." She stared at him, overwhelmed. "I did not want to be your charity," she whispered. "You are not," Adrian said firmly. "This is not charity. This is recognition. This is respect." He stepped closer, but not too close. He left space for her to decide. "If you want me to leave after this, I will. If you want time, you will have it. But I needed you to know that what I feel is real, and what you are capable of is real too." She looked back at the framed sheet music, the lights reflecting off the glass like tiny stars. Then she looked at Adrian, who watched her with steady patience, no expectations, just hope. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "I do not know where this is going," she said softly. "But I think I want to find out." A slow, relieved smile touched his lips, and in that moment she realized something she had been too afraid to admit before. She did not feel small beside him anymore. For the first time, she felt seen. For a long moment after she admitted she wanted to find out where things might lead, the hall felt impossibly still, like the world itself paused to witness the quiet shift between them. Adrian stood in front of her, not triumphant, not expectant, but softened by relief, as if her words had lifted a weight he had been carrying since the night they met. She stepped closer to the framed sheet music again, letting her fingertips hover above the glass. The idea that her work, something she had created in a cramped apartment with a noisy radiator and a second-hand keyboard, now stood displayed under warm stage lights felt unreal. She turned back to Adrian, her voice low but steady. "What happens now?" He smiled gently. "Now you play. And I listen." He walked back to the front row, taking his seat just as he had the first time she played here. The light softened, and she moved toward the piano with a growing sense of purpose that surprised even her. She sat down, the cushion dipping beneath her, and placed her hands on the keys. This time, she did not play quietly or cautiously. She played like someone who finally believed her music deserved to exist. Her composition filled the hall again, but now the sound was bolder, richer, shaped by everything she had learned about herself in the past days. She could feel Adrian watching, not in judgment but with the calm admiration of someone witnessing a truth unfold. When the final note settled into the air, she exhaled a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Adrian stood, clapping softly. "That," he said, "is the beginning of something extraordinary." She felt a warmth in her chest, not just from the music but from the realization that the fear that once held her back no longer had the same grip. After she closed the piano lid, Adrian approached the stage. "There is something else," he said. "Something I have been working on since the night I heard you play." Her eyebrows raised in confusion. He handed her a small folder. Inside were documents, professionally formatted and stamped with the Hale Foundation emblem. She scanned the first page, her breath catching when she read the words Music Development Grant Recipient. She looked up sharply. Adrian, what is this? A grant, he said simply. For independent musicians who need support. It covers equipment, recording costs, and private lessons with mentors in the city. It is not tied to me. It is a program we offer every year. I submitted your name because your talent deserves the kind of chance you have never been given. She stared at the folder, overwhelmed. I cannot accept this. It is too much. It is not too much, he said. It is an opportunity. And you earned it long before you met me. All I did was make sure someone finally saw you. The sincerity in his voice left no room for doubt, no trace of pity, no hidden agenda. This was not charity. This was restoration. She closed the folder and held it against her chest. Thank you, she whispered. For believing in me before I knew how to believe in myself. Adrian's expression softened. You did the hard part. You kept going, even when no one was watching. She stepped off the stage, and he offered his hand. She took it, not out of dependence, but out of acknowledgement, out of choosing the connection that had grown between them despite the fear and the distance of their worlds. As they walked toward the exit together, she felt lighter, steadier, as if the future she had once been too afraid to imagine was finally within reach. Outside, the night air was cool but gentle, carrying the soft sounds of distant traffic and the warmth of city lights glowing like tiny lanterns across the skyline. Adrian slowed his steps and looked at her. I know your world and mine are different, he said. But I hope that does not stop us from building something real. She met his eyes, her voice quiet but certain. Different worlds do not matter when people choose each other. A smile touched his lips, and for the first time since the night at the mansion, she did not feel like the girl who was laughed at. She felt like the woman who had risen above it. She squeezed his hand gently. Let us see where this goes, she said. Adrian nodded. Together. And under the soft glow of the street lamps, they walked forward, not as a millionaire and a pianist from two different worlds, but as two people who had found something rare, respect, healing, and the beginning of a love shaped not by status, but by sincerity.